it's interesting to ask, is perhaps a bit too philosophical, since predictions are extremely difficult to make, but the timeline for AGI. When do you think we'll have AGI? I posted it this morning on Twitter. It was interesting to see, like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 50 years or beyond. And most people, like 70%, something like this, think it'll be in less than 10 years. So either in 5 years or in 10 years. So that's kind of the state. The people have a sense that there's a kind of, they're really impressed by the rapid developments of ChatGPT and GPT-4. So there's this sense that there's a...
Well, we are sure on track to enter into this like gradually, with people fighting about whether or not we have AGI. Yeah. I think there's a definite point where everybody falls over dead because you got something that was like sufficiently smarter than everybody. And like, that's like a definite point of time. But like, when do we have AGI? Like, when are people fighting over whether or not we have AGI? Well, some people are starting to fight over it as of GPT-4.
But don't you think there's going to be potentially definitive moments when we say that this is a sentient being? This is a being that is like when we go to the Supreme Court and say that this is a sentient being that deserves human rights, for example.
You could make, like if you prompted being the right way, could go argue for its own consciousness in front of the Supreme Court right now.
I don't think you can do that successfully right now.
Because the Supreme Court wouldn't believe it? Well, what makes you think it would? Then you could put I think you could put an IQ 80 human into a computer and ask it to argue for its own consciousness, ask him to argue for his own consciousness before the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court would be like, you're just a computer, even if there was an actual like person in there.
I think you're simplifying this. No, that's not at all. That's been the argument. There's been a lot of arguments about who deserves rights and not. That's been our process as a human species, trying to figure that out. I think there will be a moment. I'm not saying sentience is that, but it could be, where some number of people, like say over 100 million people, have a deep attachment, a fundamental attachment, the way we have to our friends, to our loved ones, to our significant others, have fundamental attachment to an AI system. And they have provable transcripts of conversation where they say, if you take this away from me, you are encroaching on my rights as a human being.
People are already saying that. I think they're probably mistaken, but I'm not sure because nobody knows what goes on inside those things.
Eliezer, they're not saying that at scale.
Okay.
So the question is, is there a moment when we know AGI arrived? What would that look like? I'm giving Sentience as an example. It could be something else.
It looks like the AGIs successfully manifesting themselves as 3D video of young women, at which point a vast portion of the male population decides that they're real people.
So sentience, essentially. The demonstrating identity and sentience.
I'm saying that the easiest way to pick up 100 million people saying that you seem like a person is to look like a person talking to them with Bing's current level of verbal facility.
I disagree with that.
And a different set of prompts.
I disagree with that. I think you're missing, again, sentience. There has to be a sense that it's a person that would miss you when you're gone. They can suffer. They can die. You have to, of course,
GPT-4 can pretend that right now. How can you tell when it's real?
I don't think it can pretend that right now successfully. It's very close.
Have you talked to GPT-4?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Have you been able to get a version of it that hasn't been trained not to pretend to be human? Have you talked to a jailbroken version that will claim to be conscious?
No, the linguistic capability is there, but there's something... There's something about a digital embodiment of the system that has a bunch of... Perhaps it's small interface features that are not significant relative to the broader intelligence that we're talking about. So perhaps GPT-4 is already there. But to have the video of a woman's face or a man's face to whom you have a deep connection, perhaps we're already there. But we don't have such a system yet deployed at scale, right?
The thing I'm trying to gesture at here is that it's not like people have a widely accepted agreed upon definition of what consciousness is. It's not like we would have the tiniest idea of whether or not that was going on inside the giant inscrutable matrices, even if we had an agreed upon definition. So, like, if you're looking for upcoming predictable big jumps and like how many people think the system is conscious, the upcoming predictable big jump is it looks like a person talking to you who is like cute and sympathetic. That's the upcoming predictable big jump. Now that it's already now that versions of it are already claiming to be conscious, which is the point where I start going like, not because it's like real, but because from now on, who knows if it's real?
Yeah. And who knows what transformational effect it has on a society where more than 50% of the beings that are interacting on the internet and sure as heck look real are not human. What is that? What kind of effect does that have when young men and women are dating AI systems?
You know, I'm not an expert on that. I am, God help humanity, like one of the closest things to an expert on where it all goes. Because, you know, and how did you end up with me as an expert? Because for 20 years, humanity decided to ignore the problem. So like this tiny handful of people, like basically me, like got 20 years to like try to be an expert on it while everyone else ignored it. And so like, where does it all end up? Try to be an expert on that, particularly the part where everybody ends up dead, because that part is kind of important. But like, what does it do to dating when like some fraction of men and some fraction of women decide that they'd rather date the video of the thing that is like relentlessly kind and generous to them and is like and claims to be conscious, but like who knows what goes on inside it, and it's probably not real. But you know, you can think it's real. What happens to society? I don't know. I'm not actually an expert on that. And the experts don't know either, because it's kind of hard to predict the future.
Yeah. So, but it's worth trying. It's worth trying.
Yeah.
So you have talked a lot about sort of the longer term future, where it's all headed. I think
by longer term we mean like not all that long, but where it all ends up.
But beyond the effects of men and women dating AI systems, you're looking beyond that.
Yes, because that's not how the fate of the galaxy gets settled.
Yeah.